dynamic force on a projectile, because it has a low aerodynamic profile and it's a very dense material, right? It's usually lead or tungsten or something, right? So it's a very dense, very low aerodynamic profile, so it has greater, the inertial forces acting upon it are greater than the aerodynamic forces. That's why you would see, Coriolis on a bullet and not a balloon, for example. Because on the balloon, there's far more aerodynamic forces than there are inertial forces.
What? On a balloon, there's more aerodynamic forces than a bullet?
Of course, because it's got a large surface area and a very low mass. It doesn't have much inertia. It has a very huge aerodynamic area, so it's going to have far greater aerodynamic forces than inertial forces. So in the case of the balloon will be accelerated by the atmosphere as you move up and down different latitudes. It's going to be accelerated by the air mass because it doesn't have very much inertia. It's very easily subject to the aerodynamic forces acting upon it.
Okay, but we got off topic. Back to the spinning of this object underneath you. If you think that if a merry-go-round is spinning underneath you,
well, I think the merry-go-round you'd have to have the merry-go-round going pretty slow. Here's the problem. The merry-go-round, you have to go pretty slow because otherwise the centripetal force will push you to the outskirts of it. However, you will still land within the same see, the merry-go-round was not a good example because in the case of the Earth, the direction that it's trying to force you off the Earth isn't sideways, it's straight up, right? Which is why objects weigh less at the equator than they do at the poles. That's been repeatedly demonstrated.
But even the rotation of a merry-go-round. Sorry, I'll let you speak now. Even the rotation of a merry-go-round does tend to want to throw you outward as you start to accelerate, especially if you lean your head outward.
Sure,
you feel a massive centrifugal force. So that's
right, because it has a very high angular velocity.
So flat Earth solar. There's a really simple demonstration that Jake on the plane is talking about that will show you what we're talking about here. If you stand on the outside of a merry-go-round and have someone stand on the inside of it, and you spin that merry-go-round and you try to pass a ball between each other, do you know what happens?
Coriolis effect and apparent drift. But the ball does travel in a straight line, but it appears to drift.
There you go. Great. Do you know why that is?
Because the rotating non-inertial frame continues to rotate underneath the inertial frame. And once the ball leaves the hands, it enters the inertial frame, the non-spinning inertial frame.
That's incorrect.
It's because the ball lacks the inertia or has too much inertia to go from the inner to the outer.
So in the outer, the ball is traveling faster. If you can just roll the ball along the merry-go-round.
The ball is traveling. The ball is traveling straight.
Hey, flat Earth solar. Wait a second.
The ball is always traveling straight.
So flat Earth solar.
It only appears to drift. That's the whole thing. It's an apparent drift.
Flat Earth solar. It's a really simple demonstration. Just roll the ball while the merry-go-round's going around from the person on the inside to the person on the outside. The reason is because the person on the outside tangentially is going faster than the person on the inside. And so that ball is going to seem to curve, even though it never left the actual merry-go-round. It's rolling along the floor of the merry-go-round.
Rolling the ball is very different because then there'll be friction and it will actually appear to curl, where the ball will actually be not traveling in a straight line.
But the entire point is that it curves because the tangential speed on the outside is greater than that on the inside. It's the same going from the poles to the equator on the Earth. The speed at the poles is much less than the speed at the equator.
Correct. So you agree that the Coriolis effect should be more visible and more evident on the equator, where that tangential speed is the highest, correct?
When being passed to a pole. Okay, but as you know, the Earth's pretty
No,
freaking
it doesn't
big.
have to. It doesn't have to be
when
passed
going,
to the
when
pole.
going north and south. So if that's the analogy of the merry-go-round going from the outside to the inside, outside being equator, inside being a pole.
Okay, and
So
are you aware that
so hold up,
at the equator,
because the Earth's real freaking
it's
big.
considered to be traveling 400 meters per second
Yes.
underneath you. So
Not
anytime
underneath.
that you
Not,
were,
remember, we never left the merry-go-round. We never left the Earth. It's just traveling on this rotating object.
when you
On
leave
one
the
part of
object,
the rotating object, the
it is
tangential speed
underneath.
is 1. On the inside of the rotating object,
Wait,
the tangential
is
speed
it
is another.
is it your idea that if the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour and you jump up, the minute that you jump up, or if a helicopter hovers up, the Earth should start spinning underneath it? Is that
That's
where
what
you're
your
coming from?
religion says.
Yeah, but
That is what the Coriolis
don't-
No.
effect is.
No, flat.
You
flatter
can
solar-
if that was true, you could jump on an airplane and you would. You could jump on an
Yeah, but
airplane and
Jake-
you would fly 600 miles into the wall.
Yeah, but Jake,
600 miles an hour
let's
into
not
the wall.
conflate. Let's not conflate his like. We're just talking about 2 dimensions right now. We'll get to 3 dimensions in a second. For the love of all good and holy, flat or solar. All we're talking about is the outside versus the inside right now. We're not talking up and down. You stay on the freaking merry-go-round the whole damn time.
I'm just talking about the Coriolis effect and the
Yes.
effect on the
Outside to
equator,
inside.
on the outside, as you like to refer to it, or the equator. There will be a tangential velocity of over 400 meters per second.
Great.
So every second an object is no longer attached to the Earth, there should be movement up to 400 meters per second.
Incorrect.
Correct.
Incorrect.
The same
Is the object that's on the
so flat-
surface not
flat or
moving the
solar?
same
Flat or
speed?
solar?
the same way that
The-
when
the whole point
the
is
ball
here,
is released in
How
the
long
air
does it take you,
on
flat or
the
solar?
moment,
On
just
a
listen, the
merry-go-round,
moment
it's gonna
the
take-
moment that the ball
On a
is
merry-go-round, it's
released,
going to take 3 seconds for you to get from the outside to the inside. On the Earth, you can't get from a pole to the equator in 3 seconds. It's going to take you a little bit longer. You see what I'm saying? So the drift is going to both depend on your speed, because it's going to be proportional to how long it takes you to get back to that center from the outside.
I'm talking about a man on the equator throwing a ball hypothetically to a man
We're not
kilometer
throwing balls.
throwing a ball
not throwing
to
balls.
someone a kilometer away.
We're staying all in 2 dimensions right now.
No,
man.
but rolling.
You can't handle
Do you understand that rolling a ball, it's still attached? Do you understand that? And what I'm talking
Yeah,
about
it's still
is when
deviates on the
it's
merry-go-round,
no
though.
longer attached.
Yeah, even though it's attached, it still deviates on the merry-go-round, though. It still deviates to the right or the left.
If it's attached, then
Because
it's
the
not
inertial
a
forces of the
Coriolis.
ball are still greater than the frictional forces on the
If
ball.
it's still attached to the rotating object, it's not Coriolis effect. If it's
Of course, it can still be Coriolis.
Coriolis effect,
The only thing that matters if it's
two
attached to
reference
the
frames.
Earth.
2 reference frames is an antecedent for the Coriolis effect. So you need 2 reference frames, a spinning non-inertial reference frame and a non-spinning inertial reference frame. And when an
do you know
object
who invented
leaves the spinning reference frame, it will automatically, the same way that when the ball leaves the hand of the man on the merry-go-round, it instantly starts to curl. It's not a delayed reaction or after so many seconds it starts to appear. The drift is a consistent curve if the rotational speed is consistent.
So what
Oh,
about if
great.
the merry-go-round is covered in ice and you have
Wait,
a
wait.
very slick puck?
Does this guy know who invented Coriolis or who came up with Coriolis and how?
Something that really matters in this
That's to you, Jake.
Yeah, he just said that doesn't count because it was attached. He figured out Coriolis by pouring water on a spinning ball. That's how he discovered there would be a drag or a Coriolis effect. He was a French scientist from the 1700s. His last name was Coriolis. So when you say stupid shit like, oh, it's attached, it doesn't count, I have to point that out because you're a retard who doesn't know what he's talking about, globehead.
Exactly. You are a retard that doesn't know what he's talking about.
Oh, he just keeps double speaking and saying, oh, if it's not attached, there's friction. Things don't move in the air. Footballs don't experience Earth rotate under them. That's
Then
a
there's
lie.
no Coriolis. Then there's no Coriolis.
Did you see
Yes,
your
you're
buddy?
right. There is no
Did you see your buddy
Coriolis.
Reckless
You're right.
Ben's
The
video
Earth
there,
does not
Nathan?
rotate. There is
Did you see
no
Reckless
proof the
Ben's
Earth rotates.
greatest flat Earth documentary ever?
Great. Welcome.
Nathan, did you see the documentary?
What
Yes or no?
documentary?
Reckless Ben's, the one that just went up on his channel about you this morning.
We're talking about Coriolis now, you know, Cypher.
Yeah, we were talking about Coriolis, buddy.
I just had a quick question for
Yeah,
Nathan.
let's
Sorry,
not derail it.
it's not
Let's
very
get back
often I
to the
get to talk
Coriolis
to you.
because
Email me.
Flat Earth Side was making some good points here.
You derailed the conversation all the
No,
time.
he's on point. We're talking about Coriolis, so Cypher, let's keep on point.
Oh,
I'll get you the link while you guys talk then.
yeah, I'd like to see that.
Bro.
Well, I was just wondering if you guys understand that there's 2 reference frames in the
There it is
Coriolis
there,
effect.
Yeah, and the Earth has one reference frame.
I think
Because we don't see the guy leaving the bucky or the van when he's driving over those bumps and the man's being thrown up in the air and he's not flying off the vehicle experiencing some apparent Coriolis effect. We see it all the time that there is no Coriolis effect. Like Nathan said, there's only a single reference frame. But you guys believe there's 2
But
because it says it in the
you understand that's because the guy that's jumping in that flatbed, the truck is going a steady speed at the time, right? The Coriolis only happens when you go from one tangential velocity to another, right? When there's a mismatch there, you get the apparent deflection because the inertia of the object will either carry it too far or not carry it far enough.
Incorrect. The moment that the object leaves the surface, whether it's going up or left or right, it would experience this effect in varying degrees based on however the trajectory of the object was released. So it would be an apparent thing always, every time. It wouldn't need to be accelerating or decelerating to experience this effect. It could just hover in the air like a drone, and we'd be able to see this effect as clear
You're
as...
saying that the Earth would be spinning underneath the drone if it's hovering,
What
right?
do you think? Do you believe the Foucault pendulum proved that the Earth rotated underneath the Foucault pendulum?
Yeah, of course, because its plane of swing is rigid in space.
Okay, so you believe the Earth turns underneath things, right?
What would be the alternative hypothesis why it matches to your
it's
latitude?
not about that,
Well,
Jay.
Why the rate of rotation
you-
is equivalent to...
But you were
the-
just arguing now that I'm not making sense because I'm saying the Earth's rotating underneath.
Exactly. But he's not saying that, Jake. He's
Yeah, but
saying
that's you're talking about 2 very different things. though.
No, he's not. Earth
The
rotating
inertia of the
under
pendulum keeps it swinging. The inertia of the pendulum keeps it swinging within a certain plane, as opposed to the object that's hovering is moving with the same tangential velocity that it left the surface of the Earth with. There's nothing that would slow it down so that the Earth would suddenly pass it by, right? Because
No, but what
an
speeds it
object
up?
stays
You're
in
saying
motion
that
unless
goes up
acted
with
upon by
velocity.
another force. What would be the other force acting on the hovering drone that would suddenly make the Earth start leaving it behind?
You're asserting that there's a magical force making it accelerate in midair as it goes up in altitude, because that's what it would require on a spinning ball Earth to keep its tangential vector above the surface. You clown show.
No, you just said a bunch of nonsense there, Nathan.
No, I didn't. If things go
You
up in
did.
altitude and they keep their tangential velocity with Earth, then they're increasing their velocity, retard, because you're extending the radius. So you.
Of course. If you get up high enough, yes.
Oh, of course I'm right. Of
That-
course
that-
Nathan's right.
By the way, that was tested in
I
I
thought I
think
just
the
said a bunch of
18th or
rambling
19th
nonsense.
century,
Now I'm right.
where when they were dropping objects from a tall tower. They noticed the
You said I said a
deviation of
bunch of rambling
deflection.
nonsense. Now you said I'm right. Wow, cool
Well,
story.
I didn't understand
Thanks for the
what you were
concession.
talking about.
I appreciate the concession. So what magical force would cause things to accelerate as they increase in altitude?
They don't accelerate, which
You're
is why
right.
you
So Earth's not rotating.
right, which is
Things are keeping their
why
tangential
when people
velocity.
which is why
Congratulations.
which is why
Welcome
when
to
that
Flat
drop
Earth.
test is carefully performed, there's a deviation on objects that are dropped.
Welcome to Flat Earth. You're right. They don't.
Yeah, welcome to Globe Earth.
There is
If you
no
drop
Coriolis.
objects from a tower, they will deflect in a direction. of the rotation of the Earth.
So now the Earth moves under hot air balloons and they're deflected?
How many miles are there in a roll of toilet paper?
We're talking about Coriolis, buddy.
Yeah.
I was just wondering out loud.
Again, it comes down to, in the example of your hot air balloon there, Nathan, again, it comes down to the, which is the predominant factor? Is it the aerodynamic forces or the inertial forces?
But did the
On a hot air balloon, it's going to be the aerodynamic forces because it has a gigantic aerodynamic profile compared to its mass.
Okay. You say
But does
so.
the
Thanks,
Earth
bud.
rotate? Does the Earth rotate underneath things, like the Foucault pendulum?
It does.
So then it must
just can't-
rotate underneath things like the hot air balloon.
You just contradicted yourself, buddy. Congratulations. Welcome to Flat Earth.
Yeah.
It would, when the hot air balloon changes in elevation or it moves latitudes, yes, there would be a Coriolis deviation on that. But the thing with the hot air balloon is it's subject to aerodynamic forces far, far more than any inertial forces. The aerodynamic forces will immediately remove any type of deviation or deflection. That's a result of the inertial Coriolis.
So what you're saying is that when a helicopter goes up, no deviation, but as it starts to move, the Earth moves under it. That's what you're saying.
It's not at all what I said.
That's exactly what you just said. Could you please?
Yeah.
A helicopter,
please
a
recap?
helicopter is a
No, don't talk
helicopter.
about
Number one is a
helicopter.
powered
Recap what you
vehicle,
said.
so you can't apply
Recap
this
what you
to a
said,
powered
please.
vehicle.
Please recap what you said.
What I said about what?
What you just said, and then I brought up helicopters. You don't remember what you were saying 20 seconds ago about tangential
I
velocity?
told you that the hot air balloon has far more aerodynamic forces than inertial forces acting upon it.
And what
As it
happens
raises
when
in
things
altitude.
move? You said things move, and there's a deflection.
Right. If you shot a projectile, if there was no air to deflect the projectile, and you shoot it straight up, it's not going to land back down where it was.
Yeah, you shoot things up, they come back down. Yeah, we know this. Earth doesn't rotate under.
And if you shoot it up high enough, yeah, in that case, there will be a deflection that's going to be due to the fact that you have your angular that you don't have the tangential velocity to account for the change in angular velocity.
Felix Baumgartner went up for 3 hours, and the Earth did not rotate underneath him. So what the fuck are you talking about? A balloon?
Yeah, because again, he was in a balloon, and balloons have aerodynamic forces as a much more predominant force than any inertial forces, and those aerodynamic forces would keep him flying over more or less the same
A
spot.
bullet has aerodynamic forces too, bud. Everything in the air.
Right, but the aerodynamic forces are far smaller than the inertial forces on a projectile because it has a low aerodynamic profile and a very high mass.
Saying aerodynamic forces, you think you sound smart saying that, bud? And then contradicting yourself and saying Earth rotates under Foucault pendulum.
Why are you
but it
so
doesn't rotate
triggered
under
every
hot air
time
balloon.
you're in here, Nathan? Jesus.
What do you mean? Stop
You're so
interrupting me.
triggered,
Why
bro.
are you censoring me, crybaby? Find a corner and cry. Go suck on your mom's tit. I don't care. I'm talking. I listen to you ramble
Nathan,
on.
So
Nathan,
about
you
adult.
can take
Such
whatever
an
you were
adult
taking.
conversation you
Are we
have,
allowed to
Nathan.
talk?
Such
Oh,
adult
you guys go
Yeah,
ahead.
let
You
him
guys
speak.
let me know when
In a few
you're
years
done
from now,
contradicting
Nathan.
yourselves.
In a few years from now, when you realize this is just a meme that was started by a stand-up comedian and a yoga instructor, you're going to feel pretty silly, Nathan, that your name has been immortalized on the internet as the moron who thought the Earth was flat.
Every
pretty sad,
ancient
bro.
civilization thought the Earth was flat. So have fun pretending some guy doing yoga invented flat Earth, you clown show.
Yeah. They also thought that chicken entrails would predict the future, right? Do you also believe that?
I'm not here to talk about beliefs. We're talking about Coriolis. Why do you want to talk about chicken heads?
Well, you just said
Clown show. You clown.
you said these ancient cultures had this esoteric knowledge, right? They also believed that the chicken entrails could predict the future. So should we believe everything that they thought?
Cricket.
Well, they were
I was on mute
ancient.
because I'm driving. You think I believe in
It's
flat
a
Earth?
false
the
equivalence
ancestors believe it's
fallacy.
flat. You fucking dumbass. You're over here attributing all of flat Earth to some guy doing yoga 5 years ago. I just pointed out
Such an
you're
adult
retarded.
conversation.
There you go, interrupting me again. Gotta censor the flat earther. He's pointing out how fucking stupid I am. Cool story.
I think it is. I think you can attribute the
at least some of the popularity of it to Eric Dubay, because many people refer to 200 proofs. It sort of sprang to life around 200 proofs. 200 proofs is based on it is actually plagiarized Rowbotham and Carpenter. So it's their arguments from the 19th century.
Oh, can you plagiarize something from the 19th century, or were there no copyright laws back then?
I didn't say they're in breach of copyright.
Oh, you said they plagiarized. He plagiarized.
Yeah, they did. They did plagiarize. Absolutely.
Okay, so he shared information that was shared back in the day. That is true. So what?
Well, copied and redistributed.
No, the world
does it change? Does it change the fact?
Without attributing. Well, I mean, I think it should change things. If you look at, like I say, many people got into this off the back of that video, at least partially.
Not me.
And then if you look at Rowbotham and the sort of character he was and the sort of things that he said, he was a known con man.
I know.
The book was highlighting observations. So observations,
many of which
are distant or whatever are timeless.
Right,
so
but they're timelessly dishonest. They were dishonest when he said them in the 1850s, and they're dishonest now.
They're not.
And
saying that to the empty claim.
He was a known con artist. He was a town-to-town con artist that would travel town to town and bilk people for money.
That's what people say about me, and I have never conned anyone. So shut the fuck up. I don't care.
I mean, this is well documented. I can show you the evidence. It'll take me a little while to rustle it up, but there's lots of Victorian newspapers that detail this.
Who cares?
Hold on.
Rowbotham didn't start the Flat Earth movement. Neither did Eric Dubay. So now we went from Eric starting it to Samuel started it, and he was a con man. Who gives a fuck? Why are you guys crying about people who are dead?
It should bother you, because many of the arguments that you...
No, what bothers me is that they're lying.
Because many of the arguments that you guys use come from these people.
Observations.
Figured out the truth.
You can call them observations, but many of those statements are the ones that flat earthers use.
Not quite, Jem.
Hang on, can I just get this out? Many of them are untrue.
We heard you.
And they emanate from a known con man.
We heard you.
Well, you didn't, because you were talking constantly. They were.
Which one is untrue? If you could maybe just give me one specific.
Well, there's one. One is a really obvious one. Is there's a light. He likes lighthouses a lot. Does Rowbotham. And he got all of his lighthouse ones. He never observed it. You say they're observations, but he didn't observe these lighthouses. He just had a book on lighthouses, and he took his information from there. But one of the ones he talks about is a lighthouse in Bermuda. I can't remember the name of the light itself, but you'll find it, I'm sure. And he talks about the height of this lighthouse based on it's an iron lighthouse made of iron. And the iron was cast, I think, in London, but somewhere in the UK. And so he has the engineer's report or something like that, where he has the actual dimensions of this lighthouse that was cast in iron. And he said, with these dimensions, it should not be visible. It should only be visible at this distance. And yet people report it's visible at this distance. And he neglects to mention that this lighthouse sits atop a 300-foot cliff, which he just totally misses out. And his that's just one example, but there are many examples of similar.
It's irrelevant because again, he wouldn't have known about the horizon argument. Again, all of our arguments today are based on you guys not being able to show that you're on a board. Use NASA. You guys say don't use NASA. We use NASA because that's what you go to as your proof of pictures and moon landings and things like that. So these are old arguments, and that's what they are. Old arguments that have been refined because we have better technology, cameras. So you can't really say. All they did is what every flat earther does, Jem, which is plant seed. You don't have to believe them. People go out there, they check out if it's true or not, and they found that it's not a globe.
Parrot stuff that confirms their bias.
They've
There's
just
no
planted a
300-foot cliff on the Black Swan, Jim. Sorry, buddy. We falsified the radius. Your religion's stupid. Thank you.
All Robotham did was plant seeds.
Say more than the Black Swan, I'm afraid,
He
mate.
planted a seed just like any other flat earther and said, hey, this could be this, and people go out there, and then what do they find? Then it can't be a globe. So again, there's no misinformation from Robotham or any of these people here. They just deliver the message in their own way, Jem, and that's how they do it.
Yes, which is to lie. And as you say, the people today have borrowed not just his arguments, but his strategy, his approach, and they do the same thing.
No, because we still see too far. That's not a lie.
Test
There is
with
no-
ourselves. Test with
It was
ourselves.
a lot easier for Robotham, of course, because there was no pictures from space back then, or space flight at all,
There
or
are no
flights.
pictures from space.
There were still no
So-
pictures from space. Yes.
Wow.
And most people
It's like
most people
2015,
hadn't
dude.
hadn't
Jim,
traveled
like
very
2015.
far.
Jim, have you learned anything since 2015, bud? Like anything from the flat earthers?
Learn something from a flat earther? No, nothing at all.
Oh,
Well, we
okay.
did learn that flat earthers are a lot more gullible than we originally thought.
Did-
Like way
Jim,
more gullible.
Jim, you didn't learn the curve formula from flat earthers? What is the curve formula, Jim?
The curve formula.
Yes, Jim. How much should Earth curve every mile? Which would be
Well,
exponential.
What you mean is 8 inches per mile squared, but that isn't that isn't how much the Earth should curve every mile.
I asked you, Jim. So that's your claim. 8 inches per mile squared.
No,
your claim?
that's the number that you're. Oh my God, who is slashing something to bits? Stop it!
Glober.
Glober mommy.
Glober mummy.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mute.
That's okay. You doing the
I'm
dishes
making
there?
dinner right now. I apologize.
All right, no,
Muting.
I feel sorry for the dinner.
I'm making
It
my
sounded
dinner.
like he was like chopping and
It's dead now, I'm sure.
Get a
Right,
couple
so
of
where
notes.
were we, Nathan? So yeah, you were searching for the curvature formula, so I gave it to you. The
8 inches
part
per
of your
mile
meme,
squared.
the part of your meme that you use to pretend that you see too far. I know.
So you admit that it's 8 inches per mile squared, and that's on the Earth curve calculators on the websites, right?
No,
No,
I don't know any website that uses that formula. No,
Metabunk.
absolutely not.
Oh, what does he use?
A more complicated formula.
Oh, really? Well, why don't we go to Metabunk right now and type in the first mile? Let's just do it right now, live for everyone. Metabunk.com.
You can, but
Yeah,
the
no.
first thing you need to learn, Nathan, right, is 8 inches per mile squared is a drop calculation. It calculates how much the Earth should drop from one point relative to another. Okay? That's what it doesn't tell you. This is very important. Listen carefully. It does not tell you what you should and should not see.
Well,
That's
funny.
a
I'm on the
different
website right now.
calculation. That's a different calculation that is required for that.
Hold on one sec, Jim. I'm on the website right now. I'll go ahead and just do the calculation right now. No problem.
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead and type in the 10 miles for the Black Swan and see what the hidden amount is.
Not 10 miles, it's 1
Excellent.
mile.
The
1.2
horizon-
miles.
And it's about to learn about the
It's like
hidden amount.
it's 9.6 miles or something is the Black Swan.
6
No.
years.
9.8, something like that.
The physical
about-
geometric
He
horizon.
can see too far, and he's about to learn how far he should actually see. And
Excellent.
will it change his view at all?
Geometric
Not one jot.
drop 66 feet, 0.6. Oh, so we have one website that confirms it's an 8 inch per mile
What
squared
is
drop.
the hidden amount, Nathan, on that calculation?
You just told me it doesn't tell you the hidden amount. It says how much Earth
It
curves.
does
And
tell
I
you the hidden. If
confirmed
you're on Meta,
it's
if
8
you're on
inches.
Meta, if you're on Metabunk, it does tell you the hidden
Are
amount.
you going to concede you just lied and said it's not 8
No.
inches when it is?
No, because
It is
that
8
is a
inches, Jim.
drop calculation. It is
I-
not the hidden amount.
I asked
Therefore,
you for the
it
curve.
does not tell you what you
I asked you for
should
the curve.
and should not see.
I asked you for the curve formula, Jim. You said it, and I said all the websites use it, and you said no, none of them do. And the first one I went to uses it. So are you going to concede you were wrong?
Use that formula. You're
are
wrong.
You going to? It right
No,
here
no,
says I could take
no,
a screenshot
you are
and put it in
wrong.
the chat.
Nathan,
Geometric
Nathan,
drop.
you are wrong.
66.6.
It may have
Yes,
got.
it does.
It may have got that
I am
result.
right. I'll post it in the chat.
Okay, it
so
may have
everyone
got
can
that
see
result,
you're
but
wrong
that does not.
And can't concede anything.
It may have got that result, but that does not mean it used that formula. Don't be silly.
Yeah, it's an approximation. It's good for the first 100 miles or so.
2 plus 2 equals 4. 1 times 4 equals 4. These are the same result, but not the same formula.
Still 8 inches, though.
You can use that calculation to figure out a drop amount. A drop amount is not what you should or should not see.
On a sphere, it should be.
That doesn't make any sense.
Nathan's looking at a page which the line under that line that he's just read out says hidden amount, but he won't read it out because he's scared of it.
Yeah, I'm scared, but you keep muting me, Jim, because you lied and said no website uses the 8 inches per mile.
It doesn't.
And I just pointed out that it does, and there you
Yeah,
go.
by the way, just so you know
How
that
have
it's
you
a...
figured out that it does? How have you shown that it
Why do you interrupt me, Jim? Just mute
because
me.
you're
the boss,
lying.
right?
Hold
Because
on,
you're lying, Nathan.
Jeremy, I have an instant debunk for him that it doesn't use that formula. Go ahead and plug in 300 miles for the distance and 0 feet for the observer height so that we're not taking into account the observer height, and look at the drop value. And you will see it is not 60,000 feet.
He's read it wrong way, guys.
I can't remember the actual formula, but it uses
Yeah, if you
it
do
uses cosine, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you do the math, if you do it over 300 miles, you get a completely different value. It's like 51,000 feet on the calculator, and it's like 60,000.
So if you just do your distance,
That's an approximation.
Kosho, just the man. What is the formula that they use on Metabunk? The standard formula for calculating the curvature.
Yeah, I haven't used that one in so long just because I used the distance to the horizon. You can use the distance to the horizon and figure it out.
Right, but we're trying to educate Nathan on what is actually used on Metabunk. Oh, is he gone?
Let's find out.
Yeah, he's gone now.
If we live on an oblate spheroid, wouldn't that change as you go more to the...
It does,
equator?
yeah. But it's so small. The oblateness
right.
is only... It's less than... it's a fraction of a percent.
Right, it's so insignificant that
So
for
it's
all
like
intents and purposes,
60 miles out of 80 out of 8,000 miles
right,
diameter.
It's fucking the Earth is rounder than a standard billiard ball, so it's for all intents and purposes undetectable.
Thank you.
So it's not like a pair then, no?
That's the one. That is the one I was looking
Oh no, it's detectable, but you know what I mean. Like for the purposes of the curvature calculation, it doesn't have to be accounted for essentially, right?